It's been a long day without you, my friend, and I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. We've come a long way from where we began. Oh, I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. When I see you again.
So everybody, if you can get seated here. I'd like to remember Pete, you know, and his golf, soccer, parties, beer drinking, sailboats. Anyway, he was a great spirit. And let's remember him in his spirit. And as we call to ask God to bless all of us here, bless the food we have here before us. And especially, we thank him for Pete's presence in our life. We always enjoy Pete whenever we got together. He was always a nice, quiet guy off the side, but you know, he had a lot of good knowledge that he passed on to everybody. So we will always remember Pete in our prayers and keep him in our hearts, especially when we see his family. And they've got a nice big family here today. We thank him for Zach, the youngest boy, who's taking care of us through Uncle Sam. Drew, the oldest, taking his dad's place here. Luke, the tallest. And then he's got Xander there. And then we have Kale and Marlene, and they're the stalwarts that help Sid. Anyway, we wish you all to remember Pete always. And we'll thank the Lord for his life. Help us to be good people as he was. And take care of Sydney. God bless. Thank you.
Was born May 12, 1944 in Detroit, Michigan, to Hans Henry Bastian Youngbloed Unterhorst and Jean Elizabeth Youngbloed Unterhorst. His family moved to Pacific Palisades when he was 6 years old. He lived for a brief time in Santa Ana and then moved to Newport Beach. He attended Costa Mesa High School for 1 year and then moved to Newport Harbor High, where he ran track and field. After graduating in 1962, he attended Orange Coast College and then to California State University, Long Beach, where he majored in mechanical engineering with a minor in ocean engineering. He graduated in 1974. His family, Sydney and Pete, met at Long Beach State in September of 1970 outside of biology class. They dated for 7 years with 2 or 3 breaks in their relationship. On August 13th, 1977, Pete married Sydney Marie Yanko at Holy Trinity Church in San Pedro, California. They raised 4 children: Drew Allen, Luke Eric, Cale Evan, and Zach Ethan. Family life always included a dog for Pete. Through college, he adopted strays, PJ and Peter, among others. When Sydney and Pete married, they had Grizzly, an Aussie Shepherd rescue, Hershey, a chocolate lab puppy, for a brief time, Patches, a mutt rescue, and Sasha and Bear, both huskies. We welcomed a few cats for the boys, including Midnight, Boots and Oreo, Diamond, but dogs were his first love. Luke.
Pete's first job was at a local hobby shop. He worked for a brief stint with the United States Post Office during his early college years. He then was a roustabout at oil fields off Pacific Coast Highway in Huntington Beach. His supervisors appreciated Pete's work ethic and encouraged him to complete his engineering degree, allowing him to work around his school schedule. He worked with them through 1974. His next job took him to the construction of the Alaskan pipeline with Fluor. He started at the Valdez Pump Station and finished his stint at Pump Station 9, just south of Fairbanks at Delta Junction. Returning to Southern California in 1977, he continued his career in the oil industry as a project manager with Burma Oil, Ammon Oil, Phillips Petroleum, Parsons E&C, Equilon, Shell Oil, Texaco, Union Pacific Resources, E&L, and Tidelines, to name a few. And most of these were at the same location. Ending with Worley Parsons retiring in 2015. After his 3 years in Alaska, work projects were located on Terminal Island and Long Beach, with a short time spent in Martinez, California, and Billings, Montana. Outside of his family, the ocean was one of his great loves. When he was young, he started his mornings headed out to the beach to body surf the wedge in Newport Beach. When he was working in Huntington Beach, he kept a surfboard in the back of his van, taking breaks from work when the surf was up. During lunch, clocking out a bit early. He sailed monohulls in his youth with his family. In 1974, he sailed on a 44-foot catamaran, Seabird, sailing across the Pacific from Point Froment in San Pedro to Diamond Head in Hawaii in 8+ days, leading the first monohull to the finish. At the end of the race, he headed for his job on the Alaskan pipeline.
Many trips were made to various boat shows. In 1977, they came across the NACRA 5.2, a 17-foot catamaran that became part of the family. Cindy and Pete began racing the cat in 1977, and Pete continued for the next 10 years, taking out nieces and nephews as crew, as well as breaking Drew, Luke, and Kale into the fine art of hanging over the side of the trapeze. During those years, Pete joined the Pacific Maritime Association, the local multi-hull sailing association, where he also stepped up as president. Sailboat regattas took the family to Hurricane Gulch, San Pedro Harbor, north and south on the coast of California, as well as Huntington Lake and Lake Tahoe. In the mid-80s, Pete decided to try his hand at the Olympic sailing cat, the Tornado. Pete and Drew sailed in the 1987 Tornado Nationals through Cabrillo Beach Yacht Club. He was also a member of Alamitos Bay and Cabrillo Beach Yacht Club, often being part of the race committee when he wasn't busy sailing. As soccer became a major part of the Jongbloed family, life sailing slowed down. He started each of the boys also playing in AYSO at the age of 5 after a suggestion from Pete's father, Hans. Hans knew that the game had the boy in the Netherlands. Pete had not played soccer, but became an eager student of the game. Pete jumped into the learning process, becoming a coach and referee. Eventually, he became the head referee for the local AYSO Region 6, refereeing local games as well as tournaments throughout Southern California. He coached each of the boys at various times of their soccer career, from their early years through Boys 1 high school age. He was there for the introduction of the MLS, Major League Soccer, for those that don't know. And his home team was the Los Angeles Galaxy, who he followed and became a season ticket holder for the last 24 years. When Drew and Luke played basketball for a couple seasons, Pete stepped up and coached their team.
Throughout his life, Pete also played golf, racquetball, and running. He ran at the Point Froment Flyers, a running club in San Pedro, during his early married life. After retirement, he began golfing regularly. He joined the San Pedro Golf Club and was president until 2022, when his health became a factor. In addition to all the activities, I already mentioned, Pete stepped up to help wherever was needed. In the early years, Drew, Luke, and Kale joined the YMCA Indian Guides, which meant Pete was also included as a chief. When he was out of work for a brief period of time, he worked at Holy Trinity Grammar School and helped to set up the computer lab. When that was a new thing to do. When Zach joined the Marines, Pete and Cindy became a member of the Blue Star Moms and Dads, helping send packages to military overseas, as well as hosting events for them in the local area. Around 2017, Pete attended the event at the Bob Hope USO at LAX. They expressed the need for volunteers, and Pete stepped up to help, working anywhere they needed him to work. His final job was the front desk, welcoming servicemen and their families as they traveled through Los Angeles on their way to other destinations. Pete is survived by his wife Sydney, his children Drew and Samantha, Luke and Blaine, Kayla and Marlene, and myself, Zach and Larissa, with his grandchildren Ethan, Xander, and Gunnar Jongbloed, and stepchildren Samantha Salcido, Stara, and Brody Theoc. Before we kick into this next piece, it is going to be a video of Pete's life, everything about him. Take the time through the video to think of memories that you might want to share post the video, and you'll be invited up to share whatever memories you may have. Thank you.
My name is Mike Nice. I went to high school with Pete. He lived about a block and a half away.
You know, this is my job here, guys. I'm sorry. It is.
All right.
Talk like Aerosmith.
I can't get down that.
There you go.
Anyway, we used to walk to school together because I was a block and a half away and walk right by his house. And we took all the nerdy math classes. Pete was more into athletics than I was at that point, so he was more well-rounded than I was. But we had a good time together, and there was one thing, you just try to think of all the superlatives about Pete, and there's just too long of a list. So I made up a list and see if anybody can tell where I copied this list from. Helpful, trustworthy, courteous, obedient, loyal, friendly, kind, and cheerful. I think I heard a few correct guesses. That's the end of my printed remarks, so from that year on, I'll just stop to listen to me. Well, I thought that Pete was such a great guy, and I haven't okayed this with you, but his parents were a little bit different. His dad once called my mom a swinus Americanus. From there on out, our parents weren't too close. Pete and I still managed to maintain our friendship despite our friction between the parents. When Pete and all the boys in Sydney would stop by my house in Utah when I lived there, majoring in being a ski bum. But one of the last trips they made up there, just before they arrived, my wife at that time announced that she wanted a divorce. So here come Pete and Sydney, all four boys, for what's supposed to be a pleasant social function. And Pete later remarked in his I Had Stayed Away, that was a really tense house. I didn't have time to warn him. It was probably not a good day to visit. Yeah, trapped. Yeah, in a hotel or something. Anyway, there's one story coming up, and you know which one that's going to be. But,
I'm waiting.
okay. After the divorce was final, they said they were really nice. They invited a single guy to go with them on a cruise. I thought, well, how sweet is that? How many people, married couples, take single guys to try out their new social status and dating and things? And yet they wanted to make sure I was happy, so they invited me on a cruise. And first day turned out pretty good. I met three ladies, and they didn't seem to object to my presence too much, so things were going pretty well. But it became a little more difficult when the dancing started. Here, one guy with three ladies. Fortunately, Pete saved me. That night, Sydney went to bed early. Out comes Pete to help me dance with these three ladies. So it really helped out there. He was really a good help there. You'd think that would be the end of the story, but no. This particular ship.
Keep talking to the front of it.
Okay. This particular ship took videos every day of the highlights of what happened. So, guess who the star of the video was? And guess which four boys happened to be watching TV when this came on. Pete was out there dancing with these strange women, and I'm not sure exactly how you asked your dad about this, but I'm sure you had a good time teasing him. Sydney wasn't there, but he was out there storming up the dance floor. I've always considered it a real pleasure to have Pete as a friend. he's going entirely too soon, but I just felt very fortunate to have him as a good buddy. We miss him.
If you're so inclined, come on up, we'll form a line here.
Yeah, all right.
Hi, I'm Bob Fagley, another Newport Harbor classmate of Pete. Oh, okay. I have some deep voice. Anyway, so another high school classmate of Pete. Known Pete for 60 plus years.
Higher.
Hold the mic up. Keep it close. Oh, it's really close. Okay.
Arrows.
That's where I see.
Okay.
Anyway, so I knew Pete mostly in high school from, I think, some math classes and running track and cross country. And there was a bunch of us up in the Harbor Highlands area that were interested in motorsports. And much to the dismay of our parents, things like a drag racing ticket in my case that my father never knew about. In Pete's case, it was the ability to launch a Corvair in the back bay, off a bridge, into the back bay.
And survive.
Not only did he survive, but he didn't even, his parents didn't know about it until it appeared in the newspaper. And I do not want to guess the conversation that he and his mother had, but I can only imagine. Pete, we stayed in touch, after he finished college. Mostly, a lot of our contacts came about through starting in the 20th high school reunion. So every 5 years, we made it a point to get together, and then when we turned 50, a bunch of us went on a cruise, and 55 and 60, and I think we kind of stopped admitting our ages, which the cruises stopped. But it gave me a chance not only to stay in contact with Pete, but to get to know Sydney, who I don't think Pete could have made a better choice in his entire life. We talked, and I could always tell Pete's just deep love for Sydney. I mean, just, he talked about his kids, but Sydney was, sorry guys, you take second place to your mom. She's just been a great person. It's just been a great privilege to have known Pete, the reunions. I was going to have one of our classmates, Diane, who I'm going to embarrass. She tears up when she talks about Pete, so I will let her pass. Peter, one of our other classmates, you may recognize if you watched the Red Deck Bartender in 48 Hours. We know him as Pete Osling, but his stage name is Pete Jason. But Pete can have a story or two about the other Pete in Sydney's life. And my incredibly close friend. Thank you, Bob.
So I'm the other Pete in the schools. And Pete and I were in Costa Mesa, Newport Harbor, Orange Coast. And my favorite story about Pete, I mean, you can't find anything bad to say about this guy. This guy was like great in every single area you could pick. And I was running for student body president at Orange Coast College. And Pete pulled me aside and he said, the boat landing down there where the Sea Scouts have it? I said, yeah. He said, there's a toilet down there. It's you can have it. And I said, wow, really, Pete, thanks. And he said, no, this is my idea. You take the toilet. And I was kind of running like third place for this election. He said, you take the toilet and you put it in front of the student union there. And you put your picture on it. And then you put a sign there and said, put an Osling on the head. And I won.
I do want to add a small addendum to the previous story.
Uh-oh.
That car accident stayed hidden for many years until I was getting close to driving age. My grandmother flies out from Michigan, and she opens up a memory book showing that newspaper article. I don't think, at least initially, I don't think I've ever seen him speechless in the way that he was that day. There was a lot of explaining to do, how he ended up there, what had happened. Anyways, do we have any others?
Where's Jim?
I'm Ralph Appy. I was involved with Pete through his AYSO connections. And some of my boys played with the Jongbloed boys, and I think I even coached a couple of them, right? Maybe not successfully, I don't know. As I remember, back our last year wasn't the studying year. So you have to understand that at the time that Pete was he was our chief referee. That means that he had to drag parents who knew nothing about soccer into a room and teach them how to referee, and then go out on the field. And we had 1,200 kids in the region about that time. And a good quarter of them were Croatian, and a good quarter of them were Italian. And so he really had to have his hands full. There's really nobody better. I think something I remember about Pete is that there was a right and a wrong. And he was very stoic about it, and that made him a perfect referee, head of the referees. I do have one gripe about him. I did tell him, I told him once, I said, Pete, just because you have 4 boys doesn't mean you can't teach each of them, coach each of their teams in any given year. And so he kind of drew the line at that spot. So anyway, after hearing about Pete's life here, I feel like I really didn't know Pete. I knew him through AYSO, and I knew him that then. He was wonderful, and I wish I had known him better. And here's to Pete and his family.
My name is Jongbloed, and I met Pete in 1964. We had a good friend named Ralph Polston, who was literally a world-class body surfer at the wedge. Ralph talked me into going down, and I became a wannabe. I met Pete in 1968 when I got out of the Marine Corps, went back to college. I had flunked out in my sophomore year. Ralph came up and said, "Hey, remember Pete?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "He's looking to move up to Long Beach State. He doesn't have a place to stay. Can he room with you?" And I said, "Geez, I'm paying $73 a month. This is a real bargain." The stories that go on, I could tell forever. Sydney has threatened me if I go too far. But there's a group over here that we call the Long Beach group. And there are people that swear that the movie Animal House was a scaled-back version of our experiences back then. And some of it's true, and Pete was a big part of that. But I think we will do without the stories.
That's all about Ronald.
Ronald. There's so many stories. Kathy Curley, a good friend of ours, whose husband was on his 3rd tour in Vietnam, wanted to get a rat, a white mouse, to remind her of Ron. I have no idea what this was about, but she couldn't keep it, and she brought him over to our place, Pete and me, and said, "Here's Ronald the rat, would you take care of him for me?" And we put him on the TV, and after a while, we took the lid off at night, and he'd crawl around on the big, huge TV. And it looked like he couldn't get down, and we didn't see how anything could get up. And about 2 weeks later, we looked, and there were 5 baby rats in there. And Pete and I concluded that Ronald had been raped. And it was our job not to flush these rats down the toilet, but to take care of them.
And the mice, I like the mice stories too.
Being an engineer, I was an engineering major too, and we found we had mice just overrunning the apartment. And we found out that they were coming in through a wall heater. You just see them constantly coming in and out of the water. So I'm an engineer. I got this idea. I took 2 strips of tinfoil, put them down, and I ripped a cord off of a lamp and stripped the cables off. And I taped the wires to the 2 strips, and I put them right next to where the
mice were coming in, and I plugged it in. And lo and behold, we were watching. First mouse came out, he looked, he jumped down, and he hit the 2 strips, and he exploded. And Pete just looked at me, he was disgusted. He said, I'm an engineer too, I know how to handle this. And 15 minutes later, he came back in with a bag of wooden mouse traps.
Mechanical versus electrical.
I do have some serious things to say, and I might keep this short, and I possibly will break up. But I describe Pete as the only person in my life, and this is going back to meeting him in 1964 and living with him for several years in '68 until Joan and I got married. Pete's the only person in my life I've ever been able to say this about. You could not meet Pete and not like him. Period. There is just a nice guy that no matter what, you liked Pete and being around him. That being said, I have a little memorial and then a couple of quick stories. There's a poem that I read years ago. It's called, and you can, I don't know what this means. Ode, Intimations of Immortality from Recollections of Early Childhood. A 6-page poem by William Wordsworth. What does this mean? I don't know. But those of us that have the white hair and of the generation are going to know immediately what this is about. Because there's 8 stanzas in that I'm going to read that have since been considered their own poem. They're now copyrighted and sold just as their own poem. And that poem is called Splendor in the Grass by William Wordsworth. What though the radiance which was once so bright be now forever taken from my sight? Now nothing can bring back the hour of splendor in the grass, of glory in the flower. We will grieve not, rather find strength, no one remains behind. And Pete, as much as I miss you and we all miss you, you have given us so many memories and so much strength to remember you by, that I know that the family and us friends, the grief is going to be terrible, but we think it's going to be short-lived because of what you've given us. And I can't thank Pete enough for being a good friend, a great roommate, and just a memorable person. And that's it. I'm not going to go too much further.
And I truly feel like I know all of you for how much you shared, even though I've never met you till today. I really felt he was family. And I miss him terribly. I checked in when he had to say goodbye last year to fight the fight, and I know he fought it very hard. And I know he wanted to come back. And when I spoke to him in July, it was positive all the way. And it's a huge loss, but you need to know, truly the most selfless man, the kindest person I probably have ever met. And I have to know that yesterday we welcomed 7 buses of Marines. And he loved to come and help the troop movement. That was his favorite thing. And when I knew I had movement, I would call him. He can come in and help me. And he loved it. So just know it was a true passion of his. He started in 2017 with us. And a couple more fellow volunteers were here. There was no way I was going to miss this. So he's loved and appreciated. And I have a coin that I want to give to your Marine over here. Go. Thank you.
So doesn't he have to do 50 squats or something?
My name's Jim Eastman, and I'm from the Long Beach crew. Jim was an electrical engineering major. I was an electrical engineering major. Pete was a mechanical engineering major. But one story I have is how I first met Pete. And I'm sure I was with Jim. And was I? Yeah, okay. I didn't know Pete. And Jim, we were down in Newport Beach. He said, we need to go over and see Pete Jongbloed. So, okay, whoever that is. So we went there,
And he lived in a cheap apartment in Costa Mesa, and he and his brother were working on a motorcycle in the living room. There were parts, grease, and oil everywhere. And the place reeked of gasoline. Now, as I understand it, Pete may have had to just bolt in the middle of the night to get out of that place, but, oh, okay, yeah, there you go. Eventually, I was a roommate with Jim and Pete in a place called, we call it Almond Street, which is where it was. And we have a jillion stories about that. One thing is it's a dump, which Cindy can attest to.
Briefly,
It is, briefly.
because I was so much younger.
It is, not everyone has lived in a house where the floors just sloped. So it was kind of in the slum, but Pete didn't have a lot of money. And his diet, I think, was basically nothing but pork and beans. And so when I got this announcement about the celebration of life and that we would have many of Pete's favorite foods, I went, oh God, no. He was a great guy.
I'm Steve Mattis, and I went to high school with Jim Alday, and then Jim moved into the dorms with Chris Milo and various and sundry other folks, including my boy's mother. So I was in the Marine Corps at the time, and so I was part of the Long Beach group because my tour of duty was certainly to serve in Long Beach at night. And we had a lot of fun for several years. And Pete and Ralph, that they talked about, and I decided that it would be a good idea to go to Mulahey because they just opened the road in 1973. So we all drove down to Mulahey, Pete in his car. I think he had a Corvair. I'm not sure what car. He was in his car. Rob was in his truck, and I was in my Volkswagen bus. Mike was born. Ben was in mother's tummy, and Chris was alive then. So we drove down, and we had a hilarious time on the road going down there. So we thought that sailing and all of the things that Pete liked to do were fun things. So I introduced Pete to a guy named Bob Hannell, who I worked for. Bob owned Seabird. And so Pete and I took a trip from San Diego north one time as Seabird was coming back from a Ensenada run. And then Pete did the Transpac with Bob in Seabird. And Pete just loved sailing. So Ralph got into the sailboat building business. So for my 25th birthday, we decided to go to Ensenada. And Pete decided he was going to sail Ralph's boat in the Ensenada race to Ensenada. So as we're driving down, we made our usual run of cases of quarts of Coors to make it across the border. And then we started working our way down, and we would park at places like the Halfway House and look way out on the horizon. There's Pete out there, lone boat, the fleet had gone. And so Pete sailed and loved to sail, so he finally shows up in Ensenada Harbor. And my wife and, see, who else was it? And Kathy, Ralph's wife, were in the bathroom. They look out the little half moon thing on the harbor, and here's Pete sailing in. So they beached the boat by our Volkswagen bus on the beach, and Ralph and I got a little tipsy that night, and the girls wouldn't let us sleep in our vehicles, so we slept on the beach. We woke up next to the catamaran and a dead seal.
And the dead seal was offended.
But Pete was always willing to get involved with anything that sounded like fun, and everything with Pete was fun. So I think
Chris, do you have anything to say about Pete? You want to say something?
Here, I'll say something.
Stories to tell from the Long Beach days about Pete having fun are
Endless.
endless. It was a
I'm sorry this Long Beach group is taking up time. I have to tell you that the fact that any of us are still here is truly amazing. The thing that happened with me, it's a Pete story, which is a little cleaner, I guess. The sailing thing with Pete was extensive, and he talked Karen, Hanchett, Milo, Naftalin into being his partner in sailing, and they sailed races and races, and they won a lot of things. Every once in a while, Karen couldn't go, and so I was asked to be the sub. And I wasn't really a great sailor, that's an understatement, but I was good at getting sick. So we're on this race, I'm on that trapeze thing, so I'm out like this, and Pete is steering, the waves are coming, and I start vomiting, and Pete's right below me, so it's all on his head. He came in second place, which was pretty good. We got to the end, I said, Pete, you might want to take a shower.
Before you receive your medal.
So our life together at Long Beach and in Molino House, first, I think was first, and these houses was amazing. And then gradually we were saved, and most of you know that most guys are saved by women, and that's what happened with us. And then Sid came along and tamed the beast. I know I can't tell this story, so I will. Several of us got into skiing. You
told me, not him.
We all go up, it's mostly couples, and we head out to ski. And Pete and Sid said, "We don't want to go." And I said, "What?" And I said, "Yeah." And so we all went skiing, and they got to know each other a lot better that afternoon. So they have a different idea of skiing than the rest of us. Yeah, much better. So you are the love of his life, followed by the boys, and then the whole family. And you know, as all they said, and many of you have said, there wasn't a nicer, kinder, gentleman, sportsman, father, and it's a tribute. Just look at this table. You know, the family, and that's really the legacy of Pete.
He was a good man. He had a good family, he had a good heart, he was generous to everyone, me included. I had the good fortune to travel with Sid and Pete a few times. We went off on some wild goose chases. Remember the time we wanted to go look at the wildflowers? Yeah. But we had to go via a golf course. But my fondest memory, identifiable memory of Pete, is when I had the good fortune to be in Italy with them. And I met them in the Milan train station under the big clock. And off we went to Bergamo for a Friends of the Creche meeting. An unusual experience at best. And the first night we were there, we settled into our very extraordinary 18th century apartment. And then we went off to have dinner. And that night, we were having such a good time. It was our first night in Bergamo. We were full of the moment. And we didn't want dinner to end, so we sent Pete off to investigate dessert. He came back with, I thought it was going to be 1 dessert, 3 fourths. It was 3 desserts, and it was wonderful, and it was one of those sort of catalyzing moments. I've also had the good fortune to know each of their children in separate and individual ways, and they are all wonderful examples of what comes from a good family with parents of good heart. So that's what I remember about Pete. He was a good man.
My name is Gio, and I'm part of the golfers table over here, because Pete loved playing golf. But I want to tell a story about the first time I met Pete. Pete loved going to the Wilk Resort with the family all the time. So I went down there with my wife, and I go down there to play golf, and they say, you're going to play by yourself, there's nobody here. And I go out to the starter, and Pete's out there. And they put us together. We go out and play golf. And thank God we did. Because on the 6th hole, I got a hole-in-one, and you need a witness. And Pete was with me. And Pete, I go, Pete, I think it's in the hole. And Pete goes, no, I think it's right behind the hole. I go, no, Pete, it's in the hole. He goes, how do you know? I go, see the 4 guys on either tee box? They're jumping up and down. And we go down there. Those guys come over. They bring out the flask. Pete and me have a hit. Pete's really happy for me. And I go, Pete, tradition is, after we finish, we go to the bar. So we go to the bar. We start having a couple of drinks, and we're having fun. And I'm a musician. He finds out I'm a musician. He goes, do you know Vatos? John Hernandez? I go, do I know Vatos? I go, he's a good friend of mine. Finds out that John's daughter was married to Zach. And I go, well, let's call him. So I grab my phone and call John Hernandez. And I give Pete the phone, and they're like, what are you calling me on Gio's phone? They're all laughing. We're having a good time. And then I go, come on, let's get the wives down here too. We got the wives down here. We're having a good time. Well, we had a great time. $235 worth of good time. But Pete was a really beautiful man. And we start talking and find out he lives out in this area. And I go, Pete, I play with a group, and we play on Mondays and down here in San Pedro. Would you like to come out and play? He said, yeah. So he's been playing with us for about 6 years. And we love Pete. And talking to his other golf buddies, Pete was a gentleman on the golf course. He just always was happy, had that smile. And thank God that I might not have been with him for 25 years, but I knew him for 6 years. And I thank God for that, because he was a really nice man. And, I used to, when he'd go out to Welk, I'd find he'd go, gee, when are you going to Welk? And we'd try to match up times, because we'd go out there and we'd go play golf and have a good time. And he was a really nice man, and I know he loved his family a lot. God bless you, Pete. God bless his family, and all his friends too.
Okay. Hello, I'm Brody. I'm one of Pete's step-grandsons. And after that golf story, I remember my own stories. So basically, I only knew Pete for a short time, but all of my memories of him were just great. Like, I don't think I've never not smiled around him, more or less. And so I just want to share this story, because his legacy definitely continued with the younger generation. So we were at Welk, and I don't remember the specific hole, but there was this one hole where there was like a bridge, and it was pretty high up, and there was like houses on the right side. And so I think Drew was with us, but he had like already hit and went down. And so Pete's teaching me how to play golf. This is the first time I ever played golf. And so I was doing kind of good, and then so he looks at me, he's like, all right, you gotta hit it kind of hard, but watch out for the houses. And I'm like, okay. So I step up, and I'm like, my was like, all right, I gotta swing it. So I just full swung it. And it was kind of dark, so I didn't see where it went. And I just hear Pete behind me, he's like, uh-oh. And I'm like, what? And so I look behind me, and then I hear like a I was like, uh-oh. And so I look over, and one of the shingles from the houses had fallen off because I hit it with a golf ball. And so he looks at me, and he goes like, shh. And then he just ushers me down to the next hole. So he's like, don't tell anybody. So I couldn't even tell how, but it was just a very fun one moment with just him and me, and just like all of those moments, I bet you everybody in this room has had one of those moments with him, and we all cherish those moments. And I just want to thank you all for being here, for this family, and sharing these stories, because it really keeps his legacy going with us and the younger generations. So thank you.
Anyway, my name is Tim Denham, and Sid's mother and my mother were sisters, so Sid's my cousin. Anyway, so everybody's had some great stories, and I always thought Pete liked me. So when we were talking about young kids, I mean, Drew was very young, and my daughter was very young. In fact, they were still in car seats. And they said, hey, we brought a boat, and I'm in the water skiing and stuff. And he goes, but I've had sail before. So he says, oh, you'll love this. So he brought up his Nacra, and I said, what's a Nacra? I didn't know what a Nacra was. I knew what a Hobie Cat was. And he says, no, it's not a Hobie Cat. It's smaller, but he says faster. So I said, okay, I'm for it. So we went to Lake Calero, and I said, well, I know a little bit about sailing because I had sailed on, quite a bit, and on trimaran and stuff, but I knew nothing about Hobie Cat. So like I said, I thought he liked me. He says, here, put this thing on. I said, what is it? It's called a trapeze. And then he says, when we get going, you're going to hang out over the side of the boat. And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, the farther you lean out there, the faster we go. And then they said, well, how am I doing? He says, no, get out there farther. So anyway, I guess when I started driving in the water, I guess that was pretty far. But anyway, and it was really cool because our kids were the same size and they were in these car seats, and we had pictures of them right with each other. And I couldn't even hardly believe that's been that long ago. And then I went golfing. He decided he could get a job up in Martinez for a while. So he said, come on up, Pete. We always like to golf. So I went golfing with him. And you're right, he's a gentleman, he's a great golfer, had a lot of fun, a lot of stories. And I said, well, I'm going to go put my clubs in the car. And I moved my car a little bit, over by where we're going to go for the 19th hole. And afterwards, I go back out there, and there's a golf ball went right through my window. And I said, Pete, do you have something to do if you don't like me? So I have lots of stories I could tell about Pete and Sid and all, and their great family, and we'll all miss him. But the one thing I want to say is that in 2021, Pete and Sid asked us to go with them on the Rhine River cruise. And I said, and it's a wine cruise. And I said, well, now you're talking. That sounds really good. Well, Pete happened, I guess Pete knew the winemaker?
Yes,
Yeah.
Ron Noble, high school.
Ron Noble. Yes, and we actually had it was a fantastic trip. And the one thing that I did at our table was, everybody put your glass up, to Sid and Pete. Sorry you couldn't make the trip. It was a beautiful trip. To Sid and Pete, thank you.
Give me the bottle.
Thank you very much. And thank you for having everybody here today. And like I said, you can see how much he was loved.
Good afternoon, my name is Lloyd Hastings. I used to work with Sydney at the Academic Information Center at Cal State Long Beach.
Stand up, Lloyd.
I'd rather not. No, I have Parkinson's, so I'd rather not shake. And she used to tell me about her fiance that was a terrific sailor. And at that time, I had not sailed, but loved to go and see the boats sailing out in the bay. And someday I thought that I'd, maybe be on one. And so he came back from Alaska, and we sailed a couple of times, and I just told him how much I totally enjoyed it. I just thought it was a fantastic experience. So in 1980, we were going to have he was going to go to the international competition in Lake Tahoe, and his crew couldn't make it. So he called me up, and because I knew very little about sailing at that point, he called me up and said, "You really enjoy this, Lloyd. How about if I teach you? and how about if you join me in the crew?" So in about a tenth of a second, I said yes. And we spent this spring and the summer having him teach me how to sail. And it was a great experience. I loved it. That the wind would come from the south and then eventually clock over to the west. And it meant that it would be a lot more advantageous to start on port tack and then change over to a starboard tack later, while everybody else would be on a starboard tack usually. So he did that. We were the lone boat going across the beach, and everyone else was beating each other up. And he turned and made a tack to the weather mark, and everyone else had to tack, and they were all coming toward us. But about halfway on that tack, he looked over at me and said, "Lloyd, we're the lead boat." And it was just a great experience to round the weather mark, being boat number one. There were 8 places that received trophies, and we took 8.
And to work side by side with him was a pleasure gift. And he had what our faith defines as, I think, the heart of a servant. And in that spirit of service, he also made sure that his sons helped and volunteered whenever they were needed as well. It was a great gift.
So at this time we had a former co-worker of his that had sent in a little snippet. He wasn't able to make it here. So I'm going to read that for everyone. "Hi Pete, this is Rick Casinas, your friend from Tidelands. We work together on oil and gas projects in the Long Beach port areas. I remember jogging with you at lunch break. I enjoyed our conversations and friendship. I was impressed with how fit you were, including your love of soccer. I hope you get to watch World Soccer Finals on TV. I also remember how good you were in drafting pipeline projects on computer. We lived through great strides in computer software. I always felt we complemented each other in our project skills, and I'm very lucky I got to share my life with you. I'm sorry to hear about your health, but I know you will be with your family. Your friend, Rick."
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm one of Pete's grandkids. Drew's my stepfather. I only knew Pete for about 4 years, 5. We're a pretty new part to the Jongbloed family. And about 2 years after Pete came into our lives, or the whole family came into our lives, I no longer wanted to hide my queerness. And there was no hesitation to any love that Pete and the whole family gave me. And that's really all anyone can ask for. But he went above and beyond with that, and he was able to listen and learn. And I'm really thankful for that.
I'm Pete's brother-in-law, Susan, my sister. I'll just, one event that we had, I used to sail with them. And I remember You know, everybody talks about what a nice guy he was, but I remember this one, we were out at Cabrillo Beach in our catamaran. A few people know Cabrillo Beach. We had white caps inside the breakwater. And Pete says, well, we've got to practice, we've got a race coming up, we got to get out there and race. So I says, well, you know, he's the skipper, I'm just a crew, I'll do what he says. So everybody else does, put on my harness. Got in the boat, we took off. We're heading toward Long Beach, and I says, yelling at him, I says, think we better get back in? He says, no, it'll be okay, we're fine, we'll hang in there. So as we're going down, and he says, and he, all of a sudden he says, I think we better head back in now, it looks a little bad out there. So he comes about, we come back, we're heading back into Cabrillo Beach, and all of a sudden we go over. Pete says, get out on the mast, keep it up out of the water, we don't want any water in the mast, we want to make sure it stays dry. I'll upright us. I'm sitting there, as my head goes down about the fourth time under water, trying to hold the mast up. At that time, both Pete and I we weren't exactly heavy, but we weren't exactly light, but Pete wasn't heavy enough at that time to really get the boat uprighted at the time. So I don't know what it was, if it got, the winds blew just right or something, but we finally uprighted. And by the time we got back into the beach, I think we both had to sit on the beach for about a half hour just to get our breath and understand what we were doing, because both of us, after we had been out there, even Pete admitted, he says, no, we probably shouldn't have gone out there. But we did, and you know, when you're young, you do stupid things. We all do, so. But he was a great brother-in-law, and we used to do things. We didn't do a lot. I lived behind the Iron Curtain in Orange County. But they'd come down once and we'd come up here, and we basically with our families. When my mom was alive, we used to always get together at least at Christmas time, because we always had a big Christmas party at her house. So, but otherwise, like everybody says, Pete was a nice guy. There was nothing, I mean, he never said anything bad about anybody. You could expect that even if he maybe didn't like somebody, he wouldn't say it. He'd just give you a nice nod and say, yeah, he's a nice guy, and move on. But, you know, we're going to all miss him, but he's probably where everybody wants to be in heaven now. So all we can do is just wait, and when our time comes, we'll all be there, and we'll all be up with him. We'll see him.
Next part.
Because the song is, the title is called, He Wasn't a Small Man, He Was a Tall Man. They say at a young age, he came out of Detroit. At that young age, already a student and adroit. In Long Beach State, another covered patio. That's where Sydney met her daddy-o. He wasn't a small man. Oh, it could have been outside, out in the quad. Sydney saw him, she said, hey, he's got a great bod. No, I'm no small man. I'm a tall man. But you know what? He saw her too and he wanted to meet her. He walked on up and he said, hello, my name is Peter. Hey, I ain't no small man, I'm a tall man. So they started their life, yeah, and 4 boys later. Pete worked hard out there, toiling in that labor. From the fields of Alaska to that SoCal beach, he was there for his family, never out of reach. If someone needed help, Pete would raise his hand. If a project needed doing, Pete was in command. He was no small man, he was a tall man. He was an outdoor kind of guy, he loved to run and jog. You see him at Paseo, just walking the dog. Soccer and golf, you could hear people say he was a hell of a man out in catamaran. He was so generous to a flaw. Just as Sidney, he'd give you the shirt off his back and maybe even a kidney. One little small man. He was a tall man. Now if you look around this room, you'll see these four heads above. A symbol of Pete and Sidney's undying love. A loving husband, dad and grandpa. In the Jongbloed family, he was the grand poobah. He wasn't no small man. He was a tall man. Say it with me. He wasn't no small man. He was a tall man. One more. He wasn't no small man. He was a tall man.
Thank you, Justin. My dad's life. To get to know him in ways that I didn't get to know him because I wasn't in college with him. I didn't get to go to the party house. Because...
come talk to us later. We'll tell you
we'll
the
do
good
that.
stuff.
There's more beer in the back, we'll talk. But I got to see so many of the phases of his life. I got to be a part of the sailing that we've heard about. I got to be his introduction into soccer, which became so much a part of our family. He got to teach me golf. I gave him a hard time about all the racing cars that he would watch, the IndyCar and the Formula One. But even that, I was able to connect with him here in the later years. The stories that I've heard mirror the stories that I had as one of his four kids. Each one of us have parts of him that we can see him every day, and we're appreciative of all that. The one part that would have been nice to have is, I couldn't tell you the number of times that I'd watch him walk into a room where he knew nobody, sit down and just start conversations with people. Just anybody. Me and my brothers, we walk in the room and we're the wallflowers. We sit back. But I think it was because he did all the talking for us. He would walk in and he took over the stage there. Didn't try to, but that was just his personality. Nobody ever seemed to have a bad thing to say about him. He always had a smile on his face. Actually, no, that's not true. My brothers and I, we saw a couple instances. We had a few experiences on the other side of it. But through him, through all the stories that we've heard, and all the stories that I'm sure I could tell you, or any of my brothers could tell you, he was always involved with us, or had us involved with him. I can't guarantee this, but he may have coined the term voluntold, not volunteered. With four sons, there was a lot of work to be done with all the different things that he was involved with, and we got to help him out. We got to help out with my mom in her quilt shop. The number of times I was refereeing on weekends when I thought I would be sleeping. But it's that spirit of his that I carry on, that I can speak to. He always got involved. If he was sailing, he got involved with the organization. He enjoyed being a part of it. When he was golfing, he got involved with the organizations there. And so, at least for me, that part lives on. And one of these days, I'll figure out how to open up the conversation with people. For now, I'll just let him bask in that glory. Mom.
Okay, so I have to say something because Peter would expect nothing less because I always manage to have a word to say. Susan Trutana, do you remember when we went to see E.T.? Yeah. We were all good. All the mothers were there in the afternoon show. And you know when E.T. did this thing with the finger and all of a sudden somebody went and suddenly everybody in the audience went That's what I think we should be doing here. I want to thank all of you for coming. I would I thought this was going to be a small group of 50. There's 180 people that said they were coming today. He touches so many lives that I didn't even know that. I knew all of you. I knew the golfers by name. I mean, I don't know you, but I knew your names and all the things he did, and God, the college stories and the high school stories, and not alone our stories of sailing. I mean, I keep thinking about the sailing and when I was his crew, and okay, so I have to share this one. Okay, we were at Lake Tahoe, and because I'm not a small woman and Peter was not a small man, and everybody we were racing was like 5'2" and 100 pounds. We kind of beat that. He said, Sydney, you need to get on this catamaran and you need to get up front by the mast. I said, okay. He goes, when we tack, you need to be in front of the mast and pass in front of the mast to the other side so we can get the most wind. I don't know what it is. Yeah. You guys know what you're saying. So I'm doing that at Lake Tahoe. It's summer. The water is probably 40 or 50 degrees because it's Huntington Lake. The snow is still melting. I passed in front of the mast and I lost my footing and I went under the trampoline. He was doing something at the back. He turned around and I bobbed up and he goes, babe, what are you doing there? And I said, pull me out. Anyway, he pulled me out alive. I want to thank all of you. Oh, Tim, yes? You're amazing. You can relate to that. You can relate to that. I am so glad you are all here. I hope you notice the boys. They're wearing their shirts that are Pete's shirts because this is Mary's life along the way. These are one of his favorites. The boys had Zach wear his uniform because so many times, so many of you meet them and they go, ooh, are you the Marine? And Kale would go, no. And they'd go to Luke, are you Luke? And they'd say, yeah. Are you the Marine? No. And then Drew, no. Okay, he's wearing the uniform, so you all know he's the Marine. See him in a totally different look, but remember, then he's just a Youngbloed brother then, but he's still always a Marine. We talked about food. I wanted to explain a few things because we wanted to put a lot of Pete here because I think if he were here, he'd be partying. He would be partying. He is partying with us. And you should have the cookies all gone before we start dinner. But he was a chocoholic. If you could have put it directly into his veins, it would have been great. But he would have missed the taste. We have his Netherlands heritage. He's got we had chocolate wooden shoes. We have windmills on there. He loves Syrah. We got into wine tasting when Annette and I were working on parties here. We were in Paso Robles having a wonderful time. He loves Syrah above all things, so we couldn't get a real Syrah, but you know what? Surprisingly, he liked Merlot and anything, you know, it was a drink. He loved Alaska Amber. We traveled to Alaska with the high school group and visited what do we call that? The brewery up there. We had a great time. That's one of his favorite beers. We went to Paso Robles, 805. Good place to go if you ever go there. He's a salmon-loving guy. If you don't like fish, life is tough. We will have tri-tip for you because that's what the rest of us also like to eat. I was a good Catholic. You know, we were supposed to eat fish on Fridays. When I first started dating Pete, he would always order fish when we went out. And for me, I ate meat. I'm going like, he's taking me out to dinner. I'm not ordering fish. Anyway, so we have salmon back there. What else do we have that's here? I don't know. We've covered a lot of things. If you don't experience it here, you'll never experience it anywhere else. Keep it in mind for Pete. I want to thank all of you who sent your memories to Pete before he passed away. When we knew that there was no future, I mean there was a future as far as it would go, I said, why have all these memories come out at this location? Let's share it with him while he's alive. And you sent pictures, you sent wonderful things. One night we did a show on the TV and just scrolled through all the pictures and chatted about everybody's pictures. And he would take his phone, he wasn't into phones until he was retired, and he lived in his phone, and it was amazing. It did many things. He played free cell. He found Sudoku, and he did all these things. But he read all of your comments. If you sent them, he read them when he was alive. It was, I hope, he never said it, but I hope he he knew that you loved him. So it was a wonderful experience. Anyway, I wanted to thank you for that, for the kind things you've said here. We do have his favorite salmon. I know some of you probably have to go because I'm sure the kitchen's wondering when the heck we're going to serve this food. But any minute now we'll have dinner because we'll quit talking. But I just want to thank you so much for being here and for celebrating his life, and give me hugs whenever you see me because I don't have it. I have my boys who are going to take care of me, but I like all of your hugs too. I'm good. Thank you.
They were spending the night, and Dad, please, let me finish the story, please. So when they came, we were having dinner, and we were having so much fun with them. I just loved them to death.
Thank you.
Dad, I'm not done. You keep interrupting me. Stop interrupting me, Dad, okay? This is my story. Sorry. Well, for my cousin Pete and my Aunt Cindy, I just want to say, he loved everyone, each one of you. I know this time has come, but we all missed him. I know we all know that. But his true love is over there. Cheers to my cousin Pete and my Aunt Cindy.
It's been a long day without you, my friend, and I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. We've come a long way from where we began. Oh, I'll tell you all